Hello and how's it going? Welcome to the channel, and I'm here for a top 15 list video for you guys. Now for this video, I'll be going over what I think are some of the best debut hard rock and metal albums of all time. Now, this list is in no particular order, and I understand that yes, there are a lot more great debut albums than this. So some people might say, well, where's this album? Or you should have replaced this album with that album or whatever. I get all that. Again, I understand that there are definitely more great debut albums, but this is just my top 15, so just keep that in mind. So let's go ahead and get started. First up, we got Alice in Chains with their album Facelift, and this is probably my favorite album from Alice in Chains. I really dig this one. If you're into grunge, of course, check out this album. Definitely a classic. Some of my favorite tracks on here would have to be Bleed the Freak, I Can't Remember, Love, Hate, Love, Sunshine, and I Know Something About You. Yeah, this is a great album. Really good debut. So, Facelift from Alice in Chains. Next up, we got Tool with their album Undertow. Definitely a solid album and definitely a classic. Really, you can't go wrong with any of Tool's albums, so you can, if you're like a new fan and you want to start out with one of their albums, you could really start anywhere. You can't go wrong with them, but yeah, this is a really great album still. I mean, there's a lot to like about this one. It's probably their most raw album. It's definitely, this is one of their more heavier albums, I would say. I know some people would agree on that, but yeah, there's a lot to like about this one, so Undertow by Tool. Next up, we got Deftones with their album Adrenaline. This is a really great debut album. Some of my favorites on here would have to be Bored, Minus Blindfold, Root, and 7 Words. These are great songs, but yeah, definitely an excellent album. Deftones, of course, excellent band. They've also never released a bad album, arguably. But yeah, if you're into new metal or alternative metal, do yourself a favor and check out this album. It's definitely a solid album. So, Adrenaline by Deftones. Next up, we got Sevendust with their self-titled debut. What a great album this is. Probably one of the best new metal albums, debut new metal albums, whatever you want to say about it. But yeah, definitely check out this album if you're into new metal. There's a lot of great stuff on here. I mean, you got Too Close to Hate, Prayer, Speak, and Born to Die. Born to Die is probably one of their heaviest songs, maybe even their heaviest song. But yeah, I really dig that one. But yeah, Sevendust debut album, really good stuff. Next up, we got Breaking Benjamin with their album Saturate. Definitely a great album. It's definitely Breaking Benjamin's most raw sounding album. I know that a lot of people would place this album at the bottom because, oh, it's too raw or something when it comes to the Breaking Benjamin ranking or whatever, but I'd actually have this album within my top 3 favorite Breaking Benjamin records. But yeah, this is a great album though. Some of my favorites would have to be Wish I May, Polyamorous, Natural Life, and Water. Water is an underrated song, I think. It's definitely very good, but yeah, I've been a Breaking Benjamin fan for many, many years now, and still really dig this album. I'd, again, say it's one of Breaking Benjamin's best. So, Saturate by Breaking Benjamin. Check it out if you're into hard rock or post-grunge. Next up, we got Red with their album End of Silence. Yeah, this is definitely a great album. I'd say Red is easily my favorite band in Christian rock. If you're into rock music that combines hard rock with orchestral stuff like strings and stuff, you're definitely going to like Red. Definitely check out this album if you're into that kind of thing. But yeah, Red, I think they're an excellent band. I might even say they're one of the greatest bands of the 2000s. But yeah, definitely a great album. I've been a fan of Red for many years, but some of my favorites on this album would have to be Breathe Into Me, Let Go, Already Over, Pieces, and Break Me Down. These are all excellent tracks, but yeah, I mean, this is definitely an essential to own if you call yourself a Red fan, but yeah, definitely a very great album and a really good debut album. So, End of Silence by Red. Next up, we got Rush with their debut album. If you're into classic rock, check out this album. If you're into bands like Led Zeppelin, you're probably going to like this album. This is before Rush became more proggy with their sound. This is obviously before Neil Peart came into the picture. May he rest in peace, of course. But yeah, this is still a great album nonetheless. I mean, it's not one of Rush's best albums, sure, but it's still a very good album. Some of my favorites would have to be Finding My Way, Here Again, In the Mood, and Working Man. These are all great songs, but yeah, Rush, I mean, you can't go wrong with them. They've never released a bad album, so yeah, Rush with their self-titled debut. It's definitely a classic. Next up, we got one of my favorite rock debut albums of all time, and that is Led Zeppelin's debut album. What a fantastic album this is. This album is just spectacular. Really, I don't think you can go wrong with any of the songs on this album. I do think that this is the best Led Zeppelin album. So if you're looking to check out Led Zeppelin, I'd say start out with this album. It's definitely a great start. Some of my favorites would have to be Good Times, Bad Times, You Shook Me, Dazed and Confused, Your Time Is Gonna Come, Communication Breakdown, and How Many More Times. What a great album this is, front to back. It's definitely excellent. If you're into classic rock, you need to check out this album. So Led Zeppelin, the self-titled debut. So next up is another solid classic rock debut, and that is Van Halen and their debut album. This is a great album. I'd say it's one of Van Halen's best albums. This is, of course, in the early days of Van Halen when David Lee Roth was on vocals, and I do prefer David Lee Roth over Sammy Hagar, but Sammy Hagar is still a good vocalist, though, but I just happen to prefer David Lee Roth, and I think most Van Halen fans do prefer David over Sammy, but they're both great vocalists, though. But the debut album, it's excellent. I mean, it's definitely one of their best, I would say. Probably my second favorite Van Halen album. There's a lot of great songs on here, and it has some of their best songs. You Really Got Me, Ain't Talking About Love, which is definitely one of my favorite Van Halen tracks. You got Jamie's Crying and Ice Cream Man. These are great songs, but yeah. The debut album from Van Halen, it's definitely a great album, definitely a classic. Next up, we got Queensryche with their album The Warning. This is definitely a classic. I mean, if you're into old school progressive metal, this album is definitely up your alley, including myself, because I do love some old school prog metal. And this is one of my favorite Queensryche albums, probably my second favorite. But yeah, I don't think you can go wrong with any of the songs on this album, but some of my favorites would have to be The Warning, the title track, Deliverance, Sanctuary, NM 156, Take Hold of the Flame, Roads to Madness. There's a lot of great songs on here, but yeah, The Warning by Queensryche. Check out this album. Next up, we got Iron Maiden in their debut album. Of course, everyone knows Iron Maiden. I mean, if you're a metalhead, I mean, you should know who Iron Maiden is, but yeah, definitely a legendary band, great band, and this is a great album. Now, when it comes to the two Paul albums, I do prefer the debut over Killers. I know that's a rather unpopular opinion in the Iron Maiden fan base, but I don't know. There's just something that I enjoy more about the self-titled debut. There's just something about this album that the album Killers just doesn't. I don't know what it is. It's just hard to say. But this is a great album, though. Great debut album. Some of my favorites would have to be Remember Tomorrow, Running Free, Phantom of the Opera, and the title track, Iron Maiden. But yeah, definitely a great album. So Iron Maiden, the debut album. Next up, we got Judas Priest with Rock-a-Rolla. I know some people would probably disagree with me having this album on the list. I know there's a lot of people that say that this is one of Judas Priest's worst albums, but I actually don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. I don't think that this album is as bad as some people make it out to be. I think this is a really solid album, though. Sure, it's not one of their best, but I do think it's still a great album still for what it is. It definitely has a classic rock feel to it, which I do like. I do like classic rock, obviously, but yeah, definitely a great album for sure. Some of my favorites would have to be One for the Road, the title track, Never Satisfied. These are great songs, but yeah. Rockarola, Judas Priest, solid album. Next up, we got Black Sabbath in their debut album. Arguably the first heavy metal album to ever come to existence. This album is excellent. There's a lot to like about this album. It's not a very long album, at least as far as I remember, but yeah, it's definitely a very good album. So to pick favorites, it's hard to pick favorites because you can't go wrong with anything off this album. But I do like the title track, Black Sabbath. I also like The Wizard and NIB. These are great tracks, though, but yeah, definitely a classic. I mean, if you call yourself a metalhead, please check out this album since it's arguably the first heavy metal record to ever come around. But Black Sabbath, the debut album, great stuff. Okay, so next up, we got Metallica with their album Kill 'Em All. Another great album. It's not one of my favorite Metallica albums, but it's still very solid. Definitely a classic. You got great songs on here like The Four Horsemen, Motor Breath, Jump in the Fire, Whiplash, Metal Militia. I mean, these are really excellent tracks. Oh, and you got Seek and Destroy on here, which is also a classic. I know Metallica plays that one live a lot. I've never seen them live, but I do know that. But yeah, Kill 'Em All by Metallica, definitely a great album. Check it out if you're into metal, of course. Okay, so lastly for this list, this album is excellent. This album definitely had to make the list. So lastly, but certainly not least, we got In Flames with their album Lunar Strain. Of course, back when they had the vocalist for Dark Tranquillity, who is now the current vocalist for Dark Tranquillity, but yeah, In Flames, I'd say they're definitely one of the best melodeath bands, especially during this time. I do think Lunar Strain is one of their best albums, but yeah, this is when they were just... This is just really when they were on top of their game. I mean, this album in the Jester Race era, this is when they were at their best, man. I mean, we all know the direction that In Flames has taken. Not very good. More of an alternative metal direction that I'm not too fond of. Lacks replay value, and their music nowadays is just kind of generic. But this album, it's pretty great, to say the least. But some of my favorites on here would have to be Behind Space, the title track, and Star Forsaken. There's a lot of great stuff on here, but yeah. In Flames, Lunar Strain, definitely a great album. It's, of course, their debut, and I think it's great. Well, there you have it, guys. That is my list of the top 15 rock and metal debut albums. Let me know what you guys think. Which albums would you personally put on your list? Do you agree with my list? Feel free to let me know in the comments. So with that being said, thanks for watching. Have a nice day and take care.